everyone, and welcome to Schmidtless Live. Whew, what a week it's been so far. This week we're talking all things Agile and product. It's going to be a really great week. And I wanted to let everybody know that I am going to be producing some work here very shortly around finding that next job, because there's so many people out of work that I felt compelled to put together some help. Honestly, people have some really bad resumes out there, and I want to be able to help people with resumes and some link building, how to use LinkedIn, virtual networking, and interview tactics. So stay tuned to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to see that content coming up soon. But before we get started, I want to remind everyone we are hiring at Foundry, so foundrymakes.com/careers, and take a look over there. We're currently looking for engineers, developers, but we're always looking to talk to talented people. So if you're interested in talking with us, check out the link and go and check it out. So today I'm really excited because I have an old friend joining me. His name is Creg Schuman, and he is currently with Three Bridge Solutions. And this guy has seen and done it all when it comes to Agile and digital product building, building teams, working with large companies, small companies, agencies, the whole gamut. And he's going to talk today to us a little bit about his experience in building the right product and how you know you're building the right product. So first off, I want to say hi to Creg. Creg, how are you today? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing wonderful.
Good. It's good to see you.
Cool weather.
Yeah, right. So Creg, tell me about what you're doing these days. You're at Three Bridge. What's the haps there?
Yeah. So working with Three Bridge, of course, around the whole Agile world there, but also, dipping into clients as well. So, having a lot of fun right now, moving into the healthcare product side of things, and really helping them apply a lot of this Agile stuff to, the non-technology world. Now, granted, most healthcare products these days use some sort of technology, especially as they rush into the digital world. Delivering that. So, doing that, working with all sorts of teams, but also on that whole, this product of what is it that we're supposed to build, right? Helping them figure out how to do that rather than shoot from the hip, if you will.
That's cool. Yeah, so that's where I want to get started with, Creg. A lot of times these initiatives in organizations start from some sort of need, right? They identify a gap or a weakness, maybe even a market opportunity, and they're like, hey, let's go build a thing, right? Where have you seen people make the most mistakes up front? Where would you tell people to start when they see that gap or that opportunity? What's some of the first things that they should do before they go and just start building stuff?
Yeah, I think my best advice is to realize that you've just adopted a puppy, right? And you're gonna go walk that puppy. And where does that puppy just walks all around, right? But as you get more and more experience with the thing it is that is this puppy, your new product, right? All of a sudden it may become to kind of understand heel position and so forth. So I think that's the first thing of like, know that you don't have it all figured out. You haven't predicted the future, right? If you look at the Ralph Stacey model of complexity, we try to pretend we can predict everything, but that only works in the simple world. And generally, when you're looking at technology and building that, and those sort of technology products, you are thrust into that world of complexity, right? You are dealing with not knowing exactly what you're supposed to build, and you're dealing with I don't really know how to build most of this stuff anyway. So.
Right.
That's a good spot to start.
Well, and that's the thing is then people go and they brand it digital transformation. People create frameworks. Again, like everybody's looking for the easy button, right? And sure, there can be an easy button, but what I've learned over the course of my career is that there's nothing really digital about digital transformation. It's mostly cultural and organizational transformation. Most of these large institutions, they get really good at stopping forward momentum, because especially, and you've dealt with this a lot, Creg, is in the IT space, is that once we've built a thing and it's up and running, like I don't want to mess with this thing. I don't want to create new APIs and new channels and all these different things. I got it. It's running with duct tape and gum as it is. So now you want me to come in and make some big adjustments to this to create your new product stream or add e-commerce capabilities, right? I mean, in that cultural side of things, Creg, what have you experienced that works good, that doesn't work good? What's been your experience?
So, I mean, when you talk about, yeah, they don't want to mess with those things, but even when you're in the building's state itself, right, of, how do I experiment, right? And how do I admit I might be wrong? And how do I find out where maybe I should go next? And that gets to that MVP world. And I find myself often trying to really help people understand what that V stands for. It's viable, not valuable. And so that's where you get that experiment, right? I build a little thing. I just did a little test, right, and dropped it out into the world. So that's the tough part, is getting somebody to build just a little thing, right? Because they want to build all of the things possible. And so helping them find ways and find that community that they can release that to and get that feedback, do that validation, is really the first real big hurdles that I want to get teams through, to get them that, I don't know, that muscle memory, if you will,
Yeah.
of build little things, right? And yeah, have a vision. Please have a vision.
Yeah.
But that
Right.
vision is like that puppy, right? It's going to kind of move around, and that puppy's going to really pour hard left, and you discover a nice little new coffee shop. So,
Yeah, and that's I mean I love that metaphor, Craig, because it is very because it is not only taxing on your day to day, but it is emotional, right? I mean, my job is changing. I'm having to be retrained, or this group over there is going and doing all these new things, and I'm not a part of it. And so I might want to stop and block some of those things from happening, right?
right.
and
Yeah. The
and that's
sabotage.
experience you've had, right?
Yeah, I mean, sabotage is real. You're asking people to kind of admit reality, come back to more simpler things, try things rather than I have all of the answers, right? On my laptop that I carry around, I always make sure that I have a sticker that says control is an illusion, because indeed it is, right? Even if you build the most perfect, product and you think it's, and you've tested it and you release it out into the world, but yet nobody shows up, why is that, right? And so control is tough to have, right? And so, but the smaller bites you take, the easier it is, right?
Yeah.
If you haven't watched season 2 of the Umbrella Academy yet, right? When the father comes back and he goes, but I jumped way too far ahead in future and I jumped back, but it was, and he says, just try jumping seconds. He goes, what can you do in a second, right? In time travel, right? And all of a sudden he goes, you could, conquer whole empires,
Yeah.
just by those small little bites. It's so true.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. And especially because, and you've had experience with this, Craig, is that some of the organizations that as a country we need to change, and get better at what they're doing. Like you mentioned, healthcare, for example, and the way that these organizations are stacked, sometimes they can't have failure, right? Because that failure has to get reported to shareholders, Craig.
right,
And that's not a good thing, right? But part of innovation is failing, right? So
right,
what's your advice there? I mean, it's a really, how do you balance that accountability and that experimentation, but also with on the side of dealing with the failure piece?
right. So I think if you fail small, right, you're gonna have a lot less exposure, right? And if you're keeping those people involved, those investors, right, and they understand where you're going and they give you that input, right? Like any good product owner, it's like, thanks for the input, but here's where we're going, or thanks for the input, but gosh, that changes what we're doing next. It's important, right? And having investors is fine, right? But what you're really responsible for is, making a change. What is that outcome? And I think that's the other advice that I give is oftentimes we measure success in, basically circumstantial measures, right? Things that are things like, code coverage from a testing perspective, or velocity, and all, the number of bugs and so forth, and as if that is, interesting. Right. Or maybe we'll even do something worse, like measure productivity, which is number of story points per person hour, or something really silly like that, rather than measuring outcome. Right. And the outcome is, you look at, any, restaurant these days, right? They're looking at things. I mean, yeah, we're they're taking orders online and what's the amount of delivery time they have and so forth. But the owner, what they're looking for right now is customer loyalty, right? Because they know that if they start losing that customer loyalty, that's bad because we're not getting foot traffic, right? So same thing with the software world is what does this thing do? In the healthcare world, am I getting people to engage and enroll in a healthcare product that's designed for somebody who has a chronic disease? Because they know that if they actually enroll in those things, the outcomes, right, the healthier lives, less claims that are there, and thus less expense, but more so the healthier life. Are you measuring that, right?
Mm.
So you did this thing in the software. Did that get a person to go through from a digital perspective of advertisement of this program and they entice them enough that says, by golly, I think that might help me, right? I'm just recently diagnosed stage 4 cancer. Goodness knows I've been through that myself, right? And I didn't have a lot of digital content then. You just had to deal with doctors, right?
Mm.
I think my experience might be a lot different than it was 15 years ago, say.
Yeah, sure. Well,
Yeah.
and that's where I want to jump over to, because I think you're dovetailing exactly where I want to go, is your advice for product managers. So I've always talked about the role of the product manager kind of being this jack of all trades. It's a different role in every different company. There's really no set standards
Yeah.
for whether or not you're more of a UX person, or if you're more of a sales person, or if you're more of a data person. And I guess sometimes the product can determine that, but I think also the leadership determines that. One thing that I hear from product managers all the time is getting leadership or their people on board with what they're the data that they're getting from the users, from the customers, the things that they're putting in there. But the leadership might have a different idea on what their goals and their visions are. What's your advice to those product managers in order to, kind of build that buy-in internally, being able to manage up? Where have you seen it work? What have you seen work really well?
So I think going back to those measures, right? Of being mindful of how am I going to get to those measures, and a lot of that is tooling inside of the technology that you are building. And if you're not doing that and getting that alignment right with that leadership, that trust level is going to go down, right? And so with that comes more questions, comes more needs for plans, and so forth. So I love Stephen Covey's speed to trust and the 13 trust behaviors, right? Because those are things that, as a product manager, you're going to have to know that, right? When we say stakeholder management, it's kind of this nebulous thing. If you just do those 13 trust behaviors, my gosh, you're going to take care of a lot of that sort of thing, and building that trust. And yes, that's going to, I'm a big Scrum person, right? And talking about empiricism, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, here's transparency, but what is transparency, right? Is it 30% transparency? How much
Put a
here it is,
percentage on it.
right? And so I think being very clear with people what they're looking at is really important.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that's I find a lot of people that do the demo at the end of the sprint. It's like it's not a demo, right? That's not why we're here, right? What we're here is to gain feedback and plan our next steps, right? So all of those events in Scrum, they're all about a planning event. So as a
Hmm.
product, what am I going to plan, right? Sprint planning. I have an idea how it's going to get done, right? Backlog refinement, not necessarily an event in Scrum, but definitely highly suggested, right? But what is refinement? Planning a little more. You're
Yeah.
breaking those stories down and you're adding that acceptance criteria. So when you get that up into that higher level management, it's important to know that I shouldn't talk about the API, right?
Yep.
I should be talking about in context, what will this user, what will this person now be able to do? And then say, here, let's show you the thing that we built, right? And you show them through it, right? Maybe not necessarily the API, but the UI, but it depends on who the customer is, right? If your API is the product, right, for somebody else to use to fulfill your supply chain world, that's great. But show them in context of, hey, what we built allows them to do this part of this journey. Next sprint, we're going to work on this other part, right? So think of it as, I don't know, buying a plane ticket. I can search for the
Yeah.
flight. Cool. All right. Could I search for 3 flights, back and forth? Oh, no, not yet. That's good feedback. How often do you think people might do that? Oh, I don't know. Let's do some research. What have we seen? Uh,
Hmm. Yeah, and that's the other thing and I like that the way that you said that, Craig, which was, um, I see so many of those sprint planning meetings just become approval meetings, right?
right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the sprint planning is kind of, they, it's like, okay, well, yeah, we've got, these stories, and okay, what's our plan velocity? Yeah, the sprint review, it's kind of this approval. It's like, you're not seeking approval there, right? Yeah, nowhere in the Scrum Guide does it say that this product owner manager should ever approve anything, right? It says that they have finished it according to their definition of done, and they want feedback, right? And they say, hey, it's all pretty great except for this thing, it sucks. And then the product manager can go, well, it, I like it. And that's
Right.
where we're going. I think that's the other side, right? When I work with the management, the higher ups of if you are having this person be your product manager, you need to give them the authority to do that job, right? So if I find that I'm working with somebody, so well, no, I have to go and talk to
Yeah.
Joe or whoever it is. It's like, then you're not the product manager. You're not that person, right? So maybe that person should actually be running this. You quickly either figure out that they're going to, cede that authority to that person, or they maybe try to switch somebody out.
Yeah.
Still play that telephone game, but it is a telephone game. You lose those things in translation because you've got this poor team or set of teams that's supposed to build this thing, and how far away are they from this vision?
Well,
Um,
and to your point about being lost in translation, nomenclature becomes a big part of just making things more confusing, right? Because what you were talking about, some people might call a product owner versus the product manager, versus the product lead. I don't know. I mean, all these ridiculous titles,
yeah,
where it doesn't really, like you said, who's the decision maker? Whose butt is on the line if
right.
this feature set that rolls out doesn't achieve the goals as needed, right? And to your point, sometimes that's the person above that person who's sitting in that room, right?
Right. Yep.
And
Yeah.
that
And
that doesn't work.
it doesn't work, right? You don't have that person that has that authority, right? And thus the accountability. Those go hand in hand. Um, yeah, it's, I always love the other word, autonomy, but that's really, the relationship that that product person, right, has with the team, right? That team needs that autonomy, right? If you go and Google, autonomy versus alignment, right? You get the little pointy hair boss image, right? And it's like, what quadrant you're in, right? That will really help you figure out which kind of product manager sort of person should I be, right? So if that pointy haired, boss person is that product manager, yeah, which one do you want to work for? Um, which is good.
Yeah,
Good
and
question.
I think that's really good advice, Craig, because it's something I've coached product managers on before, which is own your role. And if it's not being defined by the organization, define it, bring it to the organization, say this is what I think this role should be. I think this is the power it should have. Take control over it. But what I see too often is that they wait for the organization to give them permission to be
Yeah,
a certain way, where I don't think you're just not adding as much value as you could be.
right.
And I don't want somebody going out and speaking for the customer and client that can't have the confidence to come in and say, this is what my role is, and this is what I think success looks like, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And once you kind of put that on the table, here's what I think success is like, and all of a sudden you get to have that conversation. The fun part of anything in this agile world is creating that opportunity for a conversation. It goes back to what we were talking about a little bit before of like, how do we build something and kind of fail at it, and thus how do I have that conversation around where do we go next? I mean, all of those pieces are great for a team. So the best relationships I see are when that product owner is very involved with the team and understanding what they're doing and how that's meeting that need, right? That what versus the how, right? The product owner owning this is what I need, right, to get an outcome, right? And then the team really figures out that how side. It's like, okay, you can build it like this, right? I'll put the bathroom over here in your house, and so on and so forth. The whole point of doing that sprint review is, hey, do I like that? No, 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 no. I don't like that. Now rework. That's the fun part, right? Now, if I want to move the bathroom, right? And so, I think, every one of us that went to like, computer science or something like that in college, right? It's always the first class of your first year in college, right? And it's a software engineering 101 class. And it's usually in the first week or two, right? Where the professor talks about coupling and cohesion, right? And we're all maybe understanding that we're away from home and we not, and thus we have maybe a few cocktails or whatever. We're at least, and not paying a lot of attention. And we haven't paid attention to that coupling and cohesion for a long time, right? So when we look at these products and these worlds, and oftentimes when you're in these larger companies, you're dealing with inserting a product in amongst others, right?
Yeah.
And they need to work together, right? And so this whole coupling and cohesion gets out of balance so much, right? So now that when I make one change here, it is this ripple effect. So when we talk about this end-to-end, release testing, oh my gosh, how are we going to do that? And a lot of people can take this DevOps thing that we do, right, and say, "Oh, that will fix it. We'll automate testing." It's like, hold it. DevOps maybe isn't really about that. Maybe about more about how we build resilient systems.
Yeah.
Granted, the shirt I wore today, says anti-fragile.
Hmm.
Granted, it comes from Kabuki Strength, which is a strength lifting gym out in Portland. But if you haven't read Nassim Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, about building anti-fragile systems, it's an amazing read. And that comes back to these systems that we have clamored together. I connect with Matt Schulerstone occasionally. He had been doing chaos engineering at Target. Has moved on to
Yep.
I totally forget the name. And just I love talking about chaos engineering because it is such an interesting thing because it proposes this hypothesis of if I am doing that right, how much end-to-end testing do I need to do now? Good question. And a product person is like, ooh, that should shorten things up now, shouldn't it? I'm hoping they're thinking that.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, I like the idea of it's going back to eating your own dog food, right? I mean, just
Yeah,
um, if something's going to, everything's going to have a chance to break. So, but again, it goes back to what I said is like in these cultural IT places where these teams have been built and groomed over time to keep the lights on and keep them on, because if the lights don't stay on, they get in a lot of trouble, right? But now you want to inject a new work stream, a new product, or these other things. I mean, that's really scary to folks, and a lot of times they'll either bring in consultants like you and me, or they'll just hire in a new bigwig that's going to come in and do an etch a sketch to the whole IT department or
yep,
even the marketing department. It doesn't matter when it comes to this
yep,
digital transformation stuff, right?
yes.
In your experience, Craig, I mean, where is the best place to start for these organizations in terms of really addressing that? Is it do they start internally? Should they be looking for partners? Should they hire in experts? What have you seen work, or does it depend on the organization?
I mean, it somewhat depends on the organization and their readiness. I always love the saying, "You're never a prophet in your own town." I think that's why most of my life I have been a consultant, and it's they can bring you in. It's like, well, our consultant said this, so let's try it. And of course, when you leave, they can blame you for all the problems too. But but gosh, it's really tough to say. I mean, what the reality of it is the organization itself needs to learn, right? And it needs to learn how to do these things itself, whether you have consultants or whether you even have people. Because when I look at you, if you have an employee, are they any more beholden to you than a consultant, right? The consultant's reputation's on the line,
Hmm.
right? So are we being responsible craftsmen? Is the real question.
Yeah.
And are we willing to learn and try some things? And if it doesn't work, are we willing to learn from that and say, okay, let's adapt that? Um, and that's everything from this transformation world
Yeah.
to just the tools we select, right? We can implement a tool. I mean, that's you oftentimes, oh, I hate tools.
Yeah. Right.
My hobby's woodworking, so you never have enough. But the simpler the tool, the better, right? It was last night, building a humidor and use a little plane just to camfer the edge. It's like done. I don't need to set up a router. In fact, a router would have been impossible because it was too tiny of a piece. So, but
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like people get excited, right? Because you start talking about this again. I totally agree with you, Craig. Like start with this small change, right? But
yeah,
it's hard for people not to snowball into what does this mean for the entire organization? What does this mean for our product line? What does this mean for our culture? It's really
yeah,
hard for people to
yeah,
just um, I don't know. There's another word for it than time box, but like idea box. I don't know
yeah,
that thing into
yeah.
that small implementation, right?
Yeah, and so that's where kind of, when you look at small steps, but you have to do the small steps in the right areas, right? So for organizational design, right, and talent model, right, how am I building these teams? So should I have, basically these component teams? I got an API team, and I've got a front end team, I've got a testing team. That sounds like 3 sprints before I find my first bug, right? Or do I move that to more vertically oriented in these feature teams, right, where I have all of the skills necessary on the team to build a working product at the end of the sprint?
Right.
Uh, that's one way to start, right? And then, looking at, okay, this is a technical product that usually supports some other product that you're actually selling, right? So usually in, like the healthcare product world, the healthcare product, itself is the thing that is sold, right? I want an oncology program. I want, these things,
Yep.
which are supported by, enabled by
Hmm.
these technologies. And so, start there, right? But then you have to look at the funding side of it. Am I funding projects versus products? And then the more interesting thing is like product has been a fun word for a long time. It's like, when do we get to move to value stream, right? Which
Right.
more than, right, is a set of products, a whole product line or interrelated product lines. But how do you start that funding different things? And in large organizations, they have a lot of build your own thing, but then, oh, let's build one ring to rule them all, right? These common components, right? So do I actually go out and find all of the stakeholders I possibly can find and then take the 2 to 3 years to build that common component? Or do I just find one or two line of businesses that want to start it and run with it and deal with the rework, right? To go, oh, well, we never thought about that particular thing. Let's incorporate that now into our common product. Um, so there are many, many things to it. Yeah, think about that. The other side of it is your governance, right, or your operating model, whatever you want to call it, and that's
Right.
really, where do the decisions lie, right? And with the organization working with now, I mean, I've had some amazing, senior management support at the C level, pushing those decisions down to the team in the way that they say, these are the decisions you must make. And I
Hmm.
love that language, right? Because it's not the decisions you can make. Because if I can make it, I'm going to push it off to you, Kurt, because you can make that decision. I want to be safe from that. I must make this decision. Okay, right? And so, like, how do you size things, right? It's like, will I use story points or gummy bears? That's your you
Right.
figure it out, right?
Right.
When do I release? It's like, okay, oh, that's a team decision that I must make, and so those are, push that thing as far down as you can, whatever that decision point is, and be transparent about what those decisions are that are at that team level versus any other level. And I think that's so important, because why would somebody that has a C in front of their title, right? I mean, maybe CIO, CEO, whatever it
Hmm.
is, want to talk about story points? I just don't get it. I mean, like
Yeah. Get
talking
out of
about,
the room.
yeah, it's like talking about the kind of oil I put in my car. I have no idea. I just like to drive a car, right? I have other friends that would disagree with me because they're very much car people, but hey.
Yeah. Right. Know your role. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
As a one of my partners likes to say, stay in your lane. Right.
Yeah,
And that's so valuable, Craig. Like, I think that's where the value comes in from the consultant side. Is that you're kind of coming in non-biased in a way, right? I mean, you want to see the company succeed, but you don't have all the baggage with you, so you've got a better opportunity of kind of just seeing over a lot of that stuff because
right,
you don't know that Carol over here has managed that spreadsheet for the last 10 years and we're replacing that now with an API or
right.
you know
Yeah,
you don't have that baggage. And
right,
I think that's where it's helpful. But to your point, um, why did you talk about building an API in the first place? What work have you done to make sure that what you're doing right now isn't the most efficient it
right,
could be? You don't necessarily have to replace all the people or the way that things have been done just because you installed Salesforce and Salesforce is telling you that this is the best way now to process invoices or something, right? Like,
yeah.
know your business.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I have in my life, had people ask me, it's like, can you just implement this tool for us? It's like, what problem are you trying to solve? Um, this comes back to, I always love to joke. It's like, yes, I do have a woodshop full of tools, right? But I unlike Norm Abram, I don't pull out all of the tools just to build a simple little birdhouse. Use the appropriate tools in the simplest fashion you can.
Yep.
Is the other side of it. When I start looking at backlogs, right, and we get into the agile tool world, whether that's Jira version 1 rally, the list goes on, right. I find most organizations just complicate things
Yep.
dramatically, right? I want my backlog and this backlog doesn't hold it. Is this a product, right? If there's multiple teams on a product, that's called one backlog, right?
Yeah.
And it should have one decision maker, right? And
Yep.
so, but I see people slice and dice those things, and Jira is my most favorite to pick on because, oh my gosh, right? You need to know SQL, to be able to understand that, because these boards you can construct. It's like, well, show me this, but filter out this, and it's like, oh my gosh, you got to read that query string to figure out what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Where's the transparency here? Now, granted, I come from a software development background and database, so I can get there. But gosh, most people don't know. Most product owners I know that they don't have that skill, and should they? They should just be able to say, where's my backlog, right? And
Yeah.
what portions are in the current sprint? Which ones are the highest order next? Does that still make sense?
Right. And then down the line, is that getting me to the new revenue stream that I'm looking for? How is that impacting the ROI or the
Right. Yeah.
is it or the customer happiness or success that we've determined is there, right? Like how does all these things connect? And that's what I think is great about tools like Jira and Confluence and some of their aha, the product tool, which is really great because you can do kind of a business model canvas, and then you
Yep.
can take the business model canvas and direct it all the way down to tickets and say like this is where it's impacting this part of the business model and things. And I think those tools are great and smart. But to your point, a lot of times I see, because they're going to people whose normal job is to solve problems using tools,
Yep.
that they're not surprised when they come back with more tools to solve the
Yep.
problem, right?
Yep. Yeah, and as you kind of talked about, the business model campus is all great, right?
Yeah.
But right now in the COVID world, I'm using like Mural to facilitate those things, and they're working well. The point of like having that breakdown, right? You've got this business model canvas. There's this, Don Mercure wrote a book, the professional product owner, and he has this lovely piece in there, really talking about what is the vision of your product, what is the value it's going to produce, and how am I going to validate that, right? And that's kind of that product management vacuum between the organizational vision and what teams do,
Yep.
right? And so how do you do that, right? So a business model canvas is a tool, value proposition canvas, story mapping. I mean, there's just,
Yeah.
there's a way that you can do that. And yeah, you can kind of set up some standards in an organization, which I help. I'm also kind of like, but if a team wants to kind of do something else,
Yep.
other than the business model canvas, they want to do a platform canvas or a lean canvas or an opportunity canvas, hey, try it out, see how it works. Are
Yeah.
they getting the right conversations with their stakeholders with that tool or not? And
Yeah.
if they're not, then stop, try something else.
Yeah. And before you go to present these new ideas and all these big plans and things, or building your deck, I mean, just sketching it in a notebook and taking a picture of it and sharing it with somebody, saying, "What do you think?" Is a great way to get started. Back to your point about
Yep.
starting small, like because I see it so many times. Is that yes, I am this product manager and I run this whole thing, and so I got to put together a 14-page deck in order to get my ideas across, or things like that. I think there's a better way, even during COVID times, to
Yep.
socialize your ideas without having to add more work to your plate. It's okay to just use analog resources too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, granted, you're stuck in the COVID world, but tools like Mural and Miro
Yeah.
and others like
Yep.
it, you can draw, it's like you can draw together at a whiteboard, right? Um, Now, granted, I highly suggest using like uh, iPad or Surface or a Wacom board or something, right? Your mousing skills on a trackpad are still challenging to me to actually do the
You and
drawing
me
on it.
both.
Right. But yeah, so you can definitely draw on there, and I've done that with some other folks who are like, yeah, I'll get my iPad out, this is great, and we draw together, and it's wonderful, right? Absent that, you can still just draw blocks and names
Right.
and move around together, and that's okay, pretty good. It's just like working with post-it notes. So yeah.
That's cool. Well, Craig, I want to thank you for joining me today. I know you're a busy guy. So you're at Three Bridge. If I want to get a hold of Craig, if I want to learn more about the work you're doing and all that, where's a great place to connect with you? Where are you most active? And yeah, how can find more about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, you just hit up, Creg Schuman at freebridge.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. So I don't do too much on the social media world, but hey.
I can't follow your Instagram stories, is what you're telling me?
Yeah, no. And
No.
it's my friend. I used to have, like, when I was doing a lot of political lobbying, I had like a Facebook list of like 5,000 friends. Friend. Oh my, I had to trim that down. I was like, I don't know you. So
Now, see,
I'm
that's
just
product
trying to get you
management at its
deployed.
best right there.
Yeah. So I'm down to a much smaller list now, which is great.
That's great. Well, Craig, thanks a lot again. I always learn so much from our conversations, and I really appreciate you and the work that you do. So thanks for joining me.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right.
Have a great
Cool.
day.
So, everybody, I just want to say thanks for showing up for the live stream. Make sure you subscribe. And like I mentioned, the hiring thing, remember that? Yeah, yep. We're still hiring. Foundry Makes slash careers. Check it out. Thank you so much for joining me. Make sure you come back on Friday. We're going to be talking some more agility with some more folks. So, check your notification button if you want to know when we're going to be live. And yeah, we'll see you then. Have a great rest of your day.